A random shooting during the morning rush hour on the 401 caught on video. CP24 spoke with a witness, and we'll continue our coverage with CP24's crime analyst Steve Ryan as police search for the suspect.
And the Canada Post strike continues as talks have broken down. The two sides are too far apart.
And some international student graduates at risk of deportation. They've set up an encampment in Brampton to protest immigration policies. More on that straight ahead.
And just in time for the holiday shopping season, Ontario is matching the federal government's 2-month GST holiday. We'll tell you what items you'll save on.
You're watching Live at 5.
Good evening. I'm Bakari Savage.
And I'm Lena Latifat. Thank you for joining us here on Live at 5 tonight. Police are looking for a suspect after shots were fired at a number of vehicles on the 401. It happened in Mississauga.
Look at this video. This was sent to us by a viewer who was driving on the 401 near Dixie. This was around 5 o'clock yesterday morning. Police did receive several 911 calls about shots being fired at passing cars. They say the suspect then stole a car and left the area. That vehicle was later found in Etobicoke. The suspect is being described as black, 25 to 35 years old, about 5'10", with long braided hair to the middle of his back.
And police are also trying to determine if this is connected to the shooting of a man in Etobicoke a short time later. To help us connect the dots, we're joined live by CP24's crime analyst Steve Ryan tonight. Steve, thanks so much for joining us. We've been talking about how brazen this is all day. At least 10 vehicles shot at, Steve?
10 vehicles struck. Miraculously, the OPP say that nobody was hit. But they now have an arrest warrant out for this guy. Troy LeDrew is his name, and I do believe we have his photo that we're going to show at some point. He is wanted on a variety of criminal charges. Very concerning. This just happened at 5 o'clock in the morning, randomly shooting at vehicles. Now, police allege that he stole a vehicle at 401 in Dixie, where he began shooting. And that vehicle was located a short distance away on Fasken Drive in Etobicoke. So that vehicle will have precious evidence in it, but there is an arrest warrant for him. They just can't find him. So once he is located, he'll be arrested and brought before the courts.
Okay, so we have to also talk about the role of other witnesses. We did speak with the man who gave us this video. He also saw the suspect holding the gun. That was something that we talked about. We purposely, intentionally asked him about that. Can you talk about that and the other people who were driving on the 401 at that time?
Yeah, so, and that was a great question that you asked him about this man's opinion, whether or not this accused had knowledge of handling a firearm. And he said in his opinion that he did. The reason why that was so important was because that certainly tends to add to the aggravating factors. Now, I did see a picture that was taken off of social media of the suspect holding a gun, and he is actually holding it. It appears as though he's holding it in the proper manner, which is two hands, strong hand, weak hand underneath. That certainly suggests and corroborates what this witness that spoke to you said, that this guy had some knowledge of handling the firearm, and it is an aggravating factor if, in fact, this guy had some knowledge, and now he's just randomly shooting at innocent people out on the highways.
There was an incident in Etobicoke. All we know right now is that it's a separate incident, but police are trying to figure out if this is connected to that. Can you help us understand that?
Yeah, and that would just be basic police work 101. You've got a guy shooting at 10 vehicles on the side of the road at 5 o'clock in the morning, and he's got a gun, clearly. Then there's a stolen car in Etobicoke that he was in, seen leaving. Now there's an incident in Etobicoke that the Toronto police are investigating. So, of course, you're going to see if that person was responsible for the incident in Toronto as well. Now, we do have a clip of that interview that you did, Bakari, earlier on. Let's hear what this man had to say.
You could hear a distinct shot. Something that I could distinguish that it was a shot and it wasn't a car accident. And that's when, you know, the adrenaline starts pumping. And I mean, I did everything to get out of the way. And then from there, called 911.
Okay. So, Steve, we do have a little bit more information on that suspect. It came in recently, the arrest warrant and the name. Can you go over that information one more time, please?
Yes. Troy LeDrew is his name. He's 29 years old, and he's from Toronto. And he's now facing a variety of very serious criminal charges that would include, I would imagine, discharge firearm, weapons dangerous to the public. Very serious. So if he is seen, police are advising you keep a distance away because he is considered armed and dangerous. Be the best witness you can and call the police.
Okay, CP24's crime analyst Steve Ryan live in studio for us tonight. Steve, thanks so much for your insights. We appreciate this.
Thank you, Steve. And with that, it's now 5:05, 5 degrees. Let's get a check on the evening commute with CP24's traffic specialist, Adjoa Ntiayaboa.
Well, thanks, Yelena and Bakari. It has been quite the busy evening. We have problems that are happening that you're watching on camera this hour. This is on the Niagara-bound lanes of the QEW. Just as you make your way through third line, now it's the two right lanes that are blocked, so impacting the drive, slowing it right down from before Trafalgar. Then on the Toronto-bound QEW, on the downside of the Burlington Skyway, had a collision. It was in the left lane. That situation sorted itself out. And you're dealing with major delays on the Gardiner. Trying to get out of the downtown core, Cherry out to Dufferin continues to be your slow spot. If your travels take you towards Etobicoke, just a reminder, we still have Dundas blocked at Cloverdale Mall for the serious collision. I'll send it back to you both.
This CP24 traffic report is brought to you by 407 ETR. Enjoy the journey with a stress-free commute.
A 22-year-old man is facing charges following a string of violent sexual assaults in Peel and York regions.
Arshdeep Singh is accused of attacking 3 women in Brampton and Vaughan earlier this month. Police allege the accused posed as a rideshare driver and targeted women waiting at bus stops. Investigators say Singh is believed to be an international student. He's not associated with any rideshare operators. He faces a long list of charges, including kidnapping, sexual assault with a weapon, and sexual assault by strangulation.
We understand that reporting a sexual assault is difficult. And on behalf of our chief and our police service, we want to reassure our community and residents that we have the prerequisite supports and services available to ensure that victims are safe and comfortable in reporting their experiences.
Obviously, the first instance and occurrence, we were very taken aback by. It was very concerning to us. But as the investigation continues to evolve, by virtue of the canvass, by virtue of contacting people, by flooding the area to try to get a sense of where the offenses were taking place, all of that happens very quickly, and we began to speak to people. Our media release and our public awareness bulletin also generated leads for us.
Anybody with information about the case is being asked to contact police or Crime Stoppers.
Well, police have identified the baby who died in hospital after being found in a building near Roselawn and Marley last week.
4-month-old Azuri Bacchus was found by officers at the scene last Wednesday around 11:30 a.m. Police say they'd been called to the building by the baby's father, who reported the child missing. The baby's mother, 30-year-old Caressa Edwards, has been charged with second-degree murder.
Well, 2 men are facing charges after a violent home invasion in Mississauga last week.
According to police, 2 men posing as local service workers forced their way into a home near Lakeshore Road and Lauren Park Road, while only a young child and an employee working from the family were home. The child and employee were bound and threatened with firearms. The 2 suspects proceeded to rob the home until they were interrupted by a neighbor and fled to an awaiting vehicle being driven by a third person. 29-year-old Zain Alaban Al-Khalabi, who police say was on a statutory release living in a federal parole facility at the time, is now facing robbery and firearms charges. 27-year-old El Farouk Saleh is facing robbery and drug trafficking charges, as well as his own breach of probation charges.
And Peel Police have announced a proactive policing initiative that centers around a plaza at Huron, Ontario, and Dundas.
According to police, there have been ongoing complaints about the plaza on Huron, Ontario regarding trespassing, liquor offenses, drug trafficking, and other criminal offenses. In the past 12 months, 2 people were stabbed in the area, and there was an incident where a firearm was pointed at someone. Police say they've executed 50 arrest warrants and 2 search warrants. They've also seized $30,000 worth of drugs. And Hamilton police are asking for help to find a man who was released from jail by mistake.
Staff at the Hamilton Wentworth Detention Center noticed on Monday that 35-year-old Matthew Jordan O'Keefe had been released in error the previous Friday. He was scheduled to appear in court yesterday, but didn't show. On August 10th, O'Keefe was arrested on drug and firearms charges. And police say that he also had 12 outstanding warrants in Toronto. So if you know where he is, call police.
Durham police had an update today on efforts to address a rise in auto thefts.
Project Attire, it's a dedicated unit focused on investigating and recovering stolen cars. It's in collaboration with the Equite Association. That's a nonprofit. It works to eradicate insurance crime relating to auto theft.
So far, in 2024, we have seen an 8% decrease in auto thefts, and we are recovering more than 50% of stolen vehicles in our region. Unfortunately, we are still averaging 3 stolen vehicles a day. This number is still too high, and we are working very hard to bring this number down even more. Unfortunately, we've also seen a 13% increase in carjackings in our region so far this year, with 18 in the region compared to 16 this time last year.
Project Attire was started in December 2003 after a 100% increase in vehicle thefts from 2021 to 2023.
Well, the leaders of labor and community groups, they're showing support for international student graduates who are at risk of deportation and have set up an encampment in Brampton to protest immigration policies.
For all the details, let's go live to CP24's Sija Liu near Queen and the 410. Sija.
Hi, Lena and Bakari. This encampment at the side of a busy road at Queen and Highway 410 has been here now for 3 months. Inside aren't people without homes, but rather former international students who fear they may be deported. They have been braving the elements now for 3 months to protest recent changes to the federal government's immigration policy. Some of the changes include the federal government announcing that immigration levels will be decreased by 21% next year. There will also be caps on the number of temporary residents and low-wage workers. The government says these changes are to freeze population growth, to alleviate pressure on housing and social services. But now these students are uncertain about their future. It's estimated that over 200,000 temporary residents who came to Canada as international students are at risk of losing their work status and may have to go back to their home country this year and in 2025. Now, these students were also joined by dozens of labor leaders in Ontario today who are supporting them. Take a listen to what the labor leaders had to say.
International students and immigrant workers are essential to Canada. Instead, the government has bent to xenophobia and allowed misguided voices to scapegoat international students and migrant workers as the reasons behind government challenges such as housing shortages, unemployment, crime, and social services, which is just plain false.
And the students protesting here have the Postgraduate Workers Permit, or the PGWP, and many of them came here during the height of the pandemic when there was a labor shortage. So their message now is, if we were good enough to work, we should be good enough to stay. Back to you.
From Brampton tonight. Sija, thanks so much. We'll take you to our nation's capital now, where Ottawa's efforts to curb immigration, they're having a ripple effect at local colleges.
Sheridan College says it is suspending dozens of its programs and reducing its staff due to an expected decline in enrollment. The college says that 40 programs affected include those in the faculties of animation, arts and design, applied health and community studies, humanities and social sciences, as well as applied science and technology. The federal government has introduced an international student cap and announced that it would be limiting international college students' work permits after graduation to areas that have labor market shortages in Canada.
Well, Sheridan students we spoke to, they're concerned about the status of their programs.
And the college expects to see a drop in revenue of more than $100 million next year, with enrollment dropping by 30%. 40 programs have been paused. More than 24 others will undergo an efficiency review.
We'll try to get you those clips in the next half hour as we hear from students at colleges across the province. You're watching Live at 5.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has summoned Canada's premiers for an emergency meeting this hour on potential U.S. tariffs.
We are following developing news out of Queen's Park this hour. The province says it'll match Ottawa's upcoming GST holiday.
A statement from Finance Minister Peter Bethlenfalvy says that the decision follows talks with the federal government. Ontario will match the 2-month GST holiday by removing the PST from items not currently covered by existing provincial rebates. Bethlenfalvy says this will provide nearly $1 billion in additional relief for Ontario families.
And the Prime Minister is holding an emergency meeting with Canada's premiers also this hour to discuss Donald Trump's tariff threat. We just heard from Premier Doug Ford on that front.
Right now, let's go live to CP24's Andrew Brennan, who continues our coverage from Queen's Park for the latest. Andrew.
Yeah, Bakari, Lena, just going through some of the things that we heard from the Premier as he was entering his office to get on that virtual call with the other First Ministers of our country and the Prime Minister of Canada. He was talking much about securing the border and saying that this is indeed a problem, that he'd not only has been speaking with Canada's Border Securities Agency, but also speaking with the RCMP, talking about how there's not enough funding in his mind to adequately the border. And let's not forget, Canada and the U.S. have the longest unmanned border crossing in the world. The other thing that was pretty salient of what he was saying is he talked about illegals, the same terminology that Donald Trump uses when referring to either people that are seeking asylum or when it comes to irregular border crossings, that Canada needs to shore up its borders as well. The interesting thing here is that under the Trump presidency 1.0, back in 2017, after he assumed office, Canada saw an influx of migrants coming north, particularly from New York to Quebec. And that was at the highest point that we've ultimately seen month over month, regular border crossings into our country. But they're talking much more about going into the United States. That's what all this conversation is about. You're going to hear from the Premier now.
We have to take the threat seriously from President Trump. When he says we need to tighten up the border, we need to tighten up the border. We need to tighten up the border on both sides. And the federal government needs to have a plan. We don't need a plan a month down the road. We need a plan now. So we're going to make sure that we all work collaboratively together. As a province of Ontario, we'll do whatever it takes to help CBSA, help the RCMP, but we need a plan across the border.
Now, he also said that there needs to be some sort of cohesive strategy, that ultimately in his mind, he doesn't think that there has been a plan yet. That being said, he did say that there should be some sort of something coming out of this meeting, and ultimately, in the end, he believes that this is about Canada securing its border, but the impetus still being Trump. Back to you both.
Okay, reporting live from Queen's Park, CP24 is Andrew Brennan. Andrew, thank you very much. It's now 5:20, 2 above 0. This is Live at 5.
Well, mediation in the Canada Post strike has been temporarily suspended. The latest on talks next. Welcome back. Talks have stalled in the Canada Post strike, but the federal government says it's still not planning to intervene in the dispute. Striking postal workers, they held a rally in Toronto this afternoon.
For the latest, let's go to CP24's Arda Zakarian. Arda.
And CUPW did have a rally this afternoon at their Eastern Avenue facility, and members of CUPE also joined them in solidarity. And they had a clear message. They said that they are ready to negotiate and come to a fair deal. Here's more from the president of CUPW Toronto Local.
Canada Post wants to create part-time flexible jobs with lower benefits, not as strong of a pension plan. They want to gigify the workforce. Living in Toronto, we see how we have the bicyclists delivering this and that. We see in our homes 5, 10 different trucks coming by. We know these drivers don't have any benefits. They're not being able to survive, but that's why they're working 2, 3 jobs.
Well, that's still up in the air. Nobody knows at this point. The strike started on November the 15th. We're now 13 days later on November the 27th, and there's no end in sight. Back to you.
Carrying live in the newsroom with the latest on the Canada Post strike. Thank you. Well, Canada's National Mental Health Crisis Line has received more than 250,000 requests for help in its first year.
Yeah, the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, CAMH, says 988 responders have taken over 300,000 calls and texts since the hotline was launched last November. The helpline's chief medical officer says she expects call and text volumes to increase as more people become aware of the service.
It's a 3-digit crisis line for suicide prevention, 3 digits on purpose because it improves access to care when people need it the most. Over 50% of people who call us have active thoughts of suicide. And we know that the mental health distress in our country has increased definitely over the last 10 years and especially since the pandemic. But when people call us, they're specifically dealing with suicidality for any number of stressful reasons. And also people can call or text if they're worried about someone else.
And the helpline allows people who are experiencing suicidal thoughts or other forms of mental or emotional distress to get assistance 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yeah, asking for help so important. You're watching Live at 5.
And coming up, the $80 million Lotto Max jackpot is still up for grabs. We'll tell you more after the break. You may need to dig a little deeper to pay for your next cup of coffee. Here's why. Prices have climbed to their highest level since 1997 due to growing concerns over yields. Bloomberg is reporting major supply disruptions in key coffee-producing nations like Brazil and Vietnam, which are responsible for the increase. Supply chain sellers have also raised their prices and gotten rid of discounts to protect their margins. Well, one option to help pay for it is the massive Lotto Max jackpot. It's still up for grabs. Here's why. The OLG says there was no winning ticket for the $80 million grand prize. That was on the line in last night's draw. However, one Max Millions ticket worth $1 million, that was sold along with 3 Encore tickets. Those are worth $100,000 each. Lottery players will get their next chance to claim the jackpot Friday night. The odds of getting all 7 numbers needed to win the top prize are about 1 in 33 million. Right now, it is 5:28, 2 degrees, feeling like -1 outside. This is Live at 5. And police continue to search for a suspect who allegedly fired at passing vehicles on the 401 in Mississauga yesterday morning. We're going to have the latest on the investigation with CP24's crime analyst, Steve Ryan. That's next. A random shooting during the morning rush on the 401 that was caught on video. CP24 spoke with a witness. We'll continue our coverage with CP24's crime analyst Steve Ryan as police search for the suspect. And the Canada Post strike continues as talks have broken down. The two sides are too far apart. And some international student graduates at risk of deportation. They've set up an encampment in Brampton to protest immigration policies. Just in time for holiday shopping, Ontario is matching the federal government's 2-month GST holiday. We'll tell you what items you'll save on. This is Live at 5. Good evening. I'm Bakari Savage. Well, police are looking for a suspect after shots were fired at vehicles on the 401 in Mississauga. Look at this video. This video was sent to us by a viewer who was driving on the 401 near Dixie around 5 o'clock yesterday morning. So police did receive several 911 calls about shots being fired at passing cars. They say the suspect then stole a car and left the area. That vehicle was later found in Etobicoke. The suspect is described as black, 25 to 35 years old, about 5'10", with long braided hair to the middle of his back.
After thinking of it over and over again, replaying in my head, I was suspecting that the accident that I saw in front of me shortly after I left the scene, it was related to him. I don't know for a fact, but his intentions were clear. He wanted to do harm, and it wasn't going to happen with me.
Okay, so that was Mike. That was the viewer who sent us that video. Now, police are also trying to determine if this is connected with the shooting of a man in Etobicoke a short time later. Right now, we're going to speak with CP24's crime analyst, Steve Ryan, who has the latest in this. So along with that description, we now know more details about the suspect. Police just released some details.
Yeah, that's right. So the OPP have now taken out an arrest warrant for Troy LeDrew, 29 years old, of Toronto. So he's facing a variety of very serious criminal charges, most likely including weapons dangerous and discharged firearm, times 10. And it's times 10 because the OPP tell us that 10 cars were struck by bullets. Miraculously, there was no physical injuries.
Okay, looking at this video and, pairing this with the information of 10 cars being hit, this guy is literally walking on the 401. Help us make sense of this.
You can't make sense of it. The only thing I can say, and we've been talking about this for quite some time, and this comes from law enforcement, you've got the criminal world colliding with the law-abiding world, where you've got people most likely on their way to work at 5 o'clock in the morning, as was that witness that you spoke to. He said he was on his way to work, and this is something now that he will be left with for the remainder of his life. So that's what happens when you've got violent criminals out on our streets committing these offenses. That world collides with the law-abiding world, and the destruction that it causes is irreparable.
Steve, what was the first thing that came to your mind when you heard about this?
Again, because we've had this happen, far too often when you have shootings happening out in the general public. But one of the great questions that you asked that witness was, did this guy appear as though he was capable of handling a firearm? And he said yes, in his opinion. Now, I saw a video that was sent to me shortly after that interview, and I would agree with that guy. Based on the grip that this now accused had on the firearm, he had a strong hand on the pistol, weak hand in support. That could be fluke, but it certainly does suggest that he may have some training or some familiarity with a gun, and that would make this even more aggravating once he is brought before the courts.
Okay, Steve, as we wrap up, let's go over this warrant, the name again, and also advice for people who may come into contact, because OPP say that this guy is armed and dangerous.
Armed and dangerous. His name is Troy LeDrew. He's 29 years old, from Toronto. The OPP are advising that if you see him, keep a clear distance away, call 911, and be the best witness that you can be from a good distance.
Okay, CP24's crime analyst, Steve Ron. Steve, thank you.
You got it.
Okay, right now it is 5:34. Let's get a check on the evening commute with CP24's traffic specialist, Adjoa and Celia Bois. Adj.
Yeah, Bakari, the struggle to get home continues to be very real. We have quite a few problems happening. I'll start with the laundry list of issues on the QEW. Niagara Bound QEW right at third line. It looks like this problem, which at one point was blocking the two right lanes, managed to squeeze over to the side. This just happened seconds ago. And then further west on the QEW, just as you make your way just on the approach to Guelph line, looks like we just have that left lane. Maybe it's the two left, can't really tell because of the sign, but definitely at least one lane is blocked following this collision. Problems I can see happening on the westbound lanes of the 403 at Mavis. Collision blocking the two right lanes, and traveling towards the 401. Stalled transport truck eastbound 401 in the express. This is as you make your way through the 400. Find the right lane blocked. And just one more situation. This one on the 401. If you're having it on the westbound side, all these red lights traffic lights can't see, but in the collectors, collision does have the center lane block. And I lied. We do have one more problem, and my camera went out, so I'll just tell you about it. Eastbound on the 401 on the exit ramp to Kennedy, crews on scene of a collision that does have the right lane blocked. I'll send it back to you both.
All right, thanks a lot, Adj. The province says that it'll match Ottawa's upcoming GST holiday. A statement from Finance Minister Peter Bethlenfalvy says the decision follows talks with the federal government. Ontario will match the 2-month GST holiday by removing the PST from items not currently covered by existing provincial rebates. Bethlenfalvy says that this will provide nearly $1 billion in additional relief for Ontario families. Well, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is holding an emergency meeting with Canada's premiers this hour to discuss Donald Trump's tariff threat. Right now, let's go live to CP24's Andrew Brennan, who continues our coverage from Queen's Park. Andrew.
Hey guys, and just hearing from the Premier before he walked into his office to take this phone call with the Prime Minister and other First Ministers from across the country, what Premier Doug Ford was saying is that in his mind, he does believe that there is a border problem for Canada, and that he believes that Donald Trump ultimately is either onto something or that there is a crisis that needs to be dealt with. Now, when you look at the numbers, Canada saw about 200,000 irregular border crossings going towards the United States of people either apprehended or otherwise turned back from basically last October to this September. And that is roughly a twofold increase from just 2020. But it also is roughly 1% of all of the irregular border crossings crossings that Customs and Border Security in the United States are dealing with. Most of them are coming from the United States. And we've been hearing from different levels of government and ministers such as Mark Miller, the immigration minister, that lumping those two countries, Canada and Mexico, together is a mistake. But hearing from Doug Ford, ultimately what he's saying now is that there needs to be a unified, cohesive voice from Canada. And he does believe that there, if needed, if need be, should be a tariff war, a tariff for a tariff, if all of this ultimately does go as planned in January, the promise that Donald Trump has made. Take a listen to this.
We're going to make sure that we all sing from the same song sheet. And I never heard that. I've talked to quite a few premiers, but we're going to make sure that we do retaliate. That's the only option. If they start putting 25% tariffs on the backs of Canadians and businesses, we do $1.2 trillion a two-way trade with the United States. Ontario alone is $500 billion. And we can't sit back if they're going to put tariffs on 25% of the goods crossing the border.
Now, whether you're a student of Keynes, Freeman, Hayek even, most economists agree that adding more tariffs are ultimately something that will not do good for not just industry, but also consumer. That being said, we do not know what's going to happen in January, but we've heard already from the Premier that we have to take Donald Trump's threats seriously. Back to you both.
Okay, live from Queen's Park, CP24's Andrew Brennan. Andrew, thank you. Right now it's 5:39, 2 degrees, feeling more like 1 below zero outside. This is Live at 5. And coming up, Peel police say that a man who was posing as a rideshare driver has been charged in a series of sexual assaults, and they believe there may be more victims. A 22-year-old man is facing charges following a string of violent sexual assaults in Peel and York regions. Arshdeep Singh is accused of attacking 3 women in Brampton and Vaughan earlier this month. So police allege the accused posed as a rideshare driver and targeted women waiting at bus stops. Investigators say that Singh is believed to be an international student. He's not associated with any rideshare operators. He faces a long list of charges, including kidnapping, sexual assault with a weapon, and sexual assault by strangulation.
From the first incident, this team behind me was pulled together and really worked around the clock. These were incredibly violent, reprehensible acts perpetrated against our community. And the charges, they're shocking, but they are representative of what happened.
Anyone with information about this case, you are being asked to contact police or Crime Stoppers. Well, police have identified the baby who died in hospital after being found in a building near Roselawn and Marley last week. 4-month-old Azuri Bacchus was found by officers at the scene last Wednesday around 11:30 that morning. And police say they had been called to the building by the baby's father, who reported the child missing. The baby's mother, 30-year-old Caressa Edwards, has been charged with second-degree murder. And Durham police had an update today on efforts to address a rise in auto thefts. Project Attire, it's a dedicated unit focused on investigating and recovering stolen cars. It's in collaboration with Equite Association. That's a nonprofit that works to eradicate insurance crime relating to auto theft.
It is deeply frustrating to see people who have been caught, charged, and convicted for previous crimes being allowed to walk free without facing consequences that would deter further criminal activity. Since January of 2023, approximately 25% of those charged with vehicle thefts were also charged with failing to comply with a probation order or a release order.
Well, Project Attire was started in December of 2023 after a 100% increase in vehicle theft from 2021 until 2023. Well, an update today on oil spills in subway tunnels earlier this year that led to service interruptions for the TTC. A third-party report cites faulty and aging work cars for the hydraulic leaks and also finds the transit agency's maintenance reporting system fails to notify crews about certain components that need to be fixed. And it's not keeping proper records of repair history. The worst delay as a result of the leaks, that was May 13th, which shut down Line 2 for 12 hours. Right now it's 5:44, holding it to above zero. This is Live at 5. Well, mediation in the Canada Post strike has been temporarily suspended. The latest on talks after the break. Well, the leaders of labor and community groups are showing support for international student graduates who are at risk of deportation and have set up an encampment in Brampton to protest immigration policy.
For all the details on this, let's go live to CP24's Sija Liu near Queen and the 410 tonight. Sija.
Hi, Lena and Bakari. This encampment has been set up for 90 days now. I can tell you it feels cold in here. The walls are thin, but the people inside here, they aren't homeless, but rather they are international students who fear they will get deported because of the recent changes to Canada's immigration law. If you come with, we will show you, take you inside to show you what it looks like. There's about 25 to 30 students who have been rotating shifts throughout the night to hold down this encampment as they want their message heard. Joining me right now is Simrat. She's one of the international student graduates who has been staying here to make sure their message is heard. And Simrat, this all has to do with the fear of deportation and some of the immigration changes in Canada. Tell us about the dream that you were sold when you were back home and how reality has played out.
So back home, when we apply for studies here, the recruiters from colleges here, they clearly tell us that Canada, international, the studies here is a pathway to permanent residency. That once we complete our studies and work experience here, we are eligible for a PR, and it's very easy to get that. And that is also what's advertised on Canadian government's website as well. The studies is a pathway to PR. If we explore that program, we can stay here permanently. The slogan says, work, explore, study, explore, work, stay. So that was a dream that we were sold, that once we go through that pathway, it's very easy to get a permanent residency. But that was not the reality for us. Most of our work permits are expiring in 2024 or 2025. For those, the data is 70,000 that is expiring in 2024. We did not get a chance to apply for the permanent residency because there were no draws for the permanent residency for the main CEC, which is Canadian Experience Class. There were no draws for 2 years and 8 months out of the 3 years work permit that we had. And that is expired or expiring now, and we are left with no option, and we are here to fight for our extensions.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate your time today. And we'll just show you another look at the encampment that has been set up here for 90 days now. They have signs that say study, explore, work, and stay. That is their hope in order to stay here after they have graduated. And they are calling for a pathway to permanent residency. Back to you, Lena Bakari.
Sija Liu reporting live on this developing story. Sija, thanks so much. And staying with this story, Ottawa's efforts to curb immigration, they're having a ripple effect at local colleges.
Sheridan College says it is suspending dozens of its programs and reducing its staff due to an expected decline in enrollment. The college says the 40 programs affected include those in the faculties of animation, arts and design, applied health and community studies, humanities and social sciences, and applied science and technology. The federal government has introduced an international student cap and announced it will be limiting international college students' work permits after graduation to areas that have labor market shortages.
We're a little miffed, let's just say. We're in the Honors Bachelor of Film and Television program, so thankfully we're not cut, but we're currently under efficiency review, which is really frustrating because that means that what will likely happen is that some of our classes will be put online instead of in person,
which is really hard for a film program. Because it's the whole appeal of our program is very practical. So yeah, definitely a fear of them cutting our budget, losing equipment, and going online.
And the college expects to see a drop in revenue of more than $100 million next year, with enrollment dropping by 30%. Well, 40 programs have been paused, and more than 24 others will undergo an efficiency review.
Well, talks have stalled in the Canada Post strike, but the federal government says it's still not planning to intervene in the dispute. Striking postal workers held a rally in Toronto this afternoon.
And for the latest, let's turn to CP24's Arda Zakarian, who joins us live from the newsroom. Arda.
Bakari and Lena, they did hold a rally at the Eastern Avenue facility for Canada Post, and they were joined actually by CUPE members as well in a show of solidarity. But what we know right now, what we've been hearing from the president of Toronto Local is that there is no end in sight as of right now to the Canada Post strike. Here's more from him and also from the Minister of Labour.
I always believed Canada Post is not interested in negotiating. They wanted the government to legislate us back to work. Well, we know that's not going to happen, but they will probably mandate us to work because that's what Canada Post wants. They need to negotiate fairly. The minister needs to tell Canada Post, let's go back to the bargaining table and let's resolve this because we need good paying jobs for all Canadians. Canada Post can't be the company that is racing us workers to the bottom.
It's essential that these parties agree on a path forward, for a sustainable path forward for Canada Post, and they have to, as such, get very, very serious about these proposals. We are in a situation with that corporation where new thinking has to be applied to this.
And with Christmas around the corner, many people rely on Canada Post. Businesses across the country, everybody's waiting to see when is this going to be over. We're on day 13 now and no end in sight. Back to you.
All right, Arda Zakarian live in our newsroom tonight. Arda, thanks so much for this. It's 5:53, 2 degrees tonight. You're watching Live at 5.
And coming up, the Leafs, they're back in action tonight in Florida. They're going to be without their captain for another game.
Welcome back. Canada's National Mental Health Crisis Line has received more than 250,000 requests for help in its first year.
The Center for Addiction and Mental Health says 988 responders have taken over 300,000 calls and texts since the hotline was launched last November. The helpline's chief medical officer says she expects call and text volumes to increase as more people become aware of the service.
It is a partnered service. We have almost 40 partners across the country. It was also the result of a large investment by the federal government. And so we know that those investments can make a big difference, but a crisis line is only one part of the solution. So I think we need more investment in mental health at all levels of government, and we need better integration of services because we know having access to mental health supports is the biggest part of the solution.
The helpline allows people who are experiencing suicidal thoughts or other forms of emotional distress to get assistance 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, a crucial resource.
Well, looking at sports, the Raptors, they're in New Orleans tonight taking on the Pelicans.
3 seconds, 2. Jaden Ivey from the baseline, buries it at the horn! Pistons win!
The Raps are coming off a buzzer-beater loss to the Detroit Pistons on Monday. Toronto will be without Grady Dick again tonight as he recovers from a calf injury. He was injured in Sunday's loss to the Cavs. Tip-off in New Orleans tonight. That's at 8 o'clock.
Well, the Leafs are back in action tonight in Florida, but will be without their captain for another game.
Yeah, Austin Matthews hasn't played since November 3rd with an undisclosed upper body injury. He took part in today's morning skate in practice yesterday, but head coach Craig Berube says Matthews needs more time before he is ready to return. The Leafs have won 7 of their last 8 games, including a 3-2 win on Sunday against Utah. Puck drop tonight against the Panthers. That's at 7:30.
Well, in Toronto, it was gridlock that forced NHLers to walk to their game. In Calgary, it was the weather.
A video posted on social media shows Travis Boyd of the Minnesota Wild hauling his hockey bag and the team services manager carrying his sticks as they jog down a snowy street to get to the Saddle Dome. Boyd had been called up from the AHL and his flight to Calgary landed at noon on Saturday, but warm-up was just before 1:30. So with traffic crawling as they got closer to the arena, they just decided to get out and run. Boyd made it with 13 minutes to spare. Oh, boy.
Right now it's 5:59, 2 above 0. This is Toronto's breaking news, CP24.
Thanks so much for watching. CTV News at 6 is coming up next. We're back at 7 with more news. Stay with us.